She paid for his coffee with the last $5 in her coat pocket. And what he did next stopped every single person in that Tim Hortons from breathing. The morning rush at the Tim Hortons on Eglinton Avenue West was exactly what you'd expect on a Tuesday in February. Cold outside, coats everywhere, the smell of coffee and Timbits, people moving fast, nobody making eye contact. There were 12 people in line, maybe more. Everyone had somewhere to be. A man stood at the counter. He looked ordinary. Late 50s, maybe early 60s, a gray wool coat, worn at the elbows, simple boots. He wasn't dressed poorly, but he wasn't dressed like anyone important either. He ordered a medium double-double and a breakfast sandwich. The kind of order 100 people made every morning without thinking about it. He patted his jacket pocket, then his coat pocket. Then he looked down at his hands like they might have the answer. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly to the cashier. "I think I left my wallet at home." The man behind him, tall, expensive suit, AirPods in both ears, let out a breath loud enough for the whole line to hear. "Are you kidding me right now? I have a 7:30 meeting." The woman beside him, red parka, coffee already in hand, shook her head. "There's a lineup, sir. Either pay or step aside." The cashier, young, barely 19, looked uncomfortable. She started to reach for the manager's button on the register. And then the woman behind the man in the gray coat did something that nobody expected. She stepped forward, reached into the pocket of her scrubs, pulled out a crinkled $5 bill, the only bill she had, and set it on the counter. "I've got it," she said. Simple as that. The man in the gray coat turned around, and what he said next made that entire Tim Hortons go completely still. If you love stories where quiet people change everything, subscribe before we go any further. Turn on notifications. Because what happens next is going to stay with you. Now let me tell you who she was. Her name was Folake Adeyemi, 31 years old, born in Ibadan, Nigeria, raised partly there and partly in Scarborough after her mother immigrated when Folake was 9. She was a personal support worker at a long-term care home in North York. She worked the overnight shift, 7 nights on, 3 days off, and had been doing it for 6 years. Minimum wage plus $1.50 in overnight premium. Not enough, never enough. But she showed up every single night without complaint. She was the kind of woman who moved through the world without making a fuss about it. Medium height, natural hair, she usually kept pinned back for work. No jewelry except small gold studs her mother had given her the year they left Nigeria. She had a laugh that came fast and a voice that stayed soft. People trusted her immediately. She didn't know why. She'd never tried to earn it. Her life, if you looked at it from the outside, would have seemed impossibly hard. Her younger brother Emeka was 19. He'd come to Canada 2 years ago on a student visa after Folake had spent 18 months doing the paperwork herself, calling immigration lawyers who charged $400 for a consultation she could barely afford, writing letters, rewriting letters, submitting documents, and resubmitting them when they got rejected, for reasons she had to look up dictionaries to understand. She did it alone. She didn't complain about it. She did it because he was her brother, and there was no one else. Their mother, Mama Chidinma, was still in Nigeria. She was sick. Not dying, not yet, but the kind of sick that costs money. Rheumatoid arthritis that had been left untreated too long because the clinic near their neighborhood was understaffed and the medication was expensive. Folake sent money home every month. Not a lot. Enough. Sometimes not enough, and then she sent what she could and promised the rest next month. Emeka lived with her in a 2-bedroom basement apartment in Weston. He studied computer engineering at York. He was brilliant. Actually brilliant. The kind of student whose professors emailed him after class, not to correct him, but to keep talking. Folake knew he was going to be something. She held on to that the way you hold on to a railing in the dark. She ate lunch at work most nights. The home provided a meal for overnight staff. She had structured her whole grocery budget around that meal. On mornings after her shift, she usually went home and slept. But Tuesdays, she picked a muck-up from an early lecture, and they went to Tim Hortons before she crashed. It was the one thing they did together. He always paid. But that Tuesday, he had texted at 6 a.m. "Sis, I have a group project meeting at 7, can't make it. Sorry." Then a coffee emoji. She had gone anyway. Force of habit. Force of something she couldn't name. She'd ordered a medium tea with milk and an everything bagel toasted, and she'd taken her place in line, behind the man in the gray wool coat. She had $7 and some change in her pocket. The bagel and tea cost $4.85. She'd have a bit left over. Not much, but something. Then she heard him patting his pockets, and she didn't think. That was the thing about Folake. She rarely thought before she acted, not in moments like that. Her mother had raised her with a single sentence that had replaced 1,000 rules. Oluwa nowo osi nse mani. God is in the hand that does good before it thinks. She stepped forward and put the $5 on the counter. "Please," she said, when the man turned around to protest. "It's just a coffee." He looked at her for a long moment, brown eyes, tired but sharp. Something moved across his face that she couldn't read. "Thank you," he said. And the way he said it, quiet, like it cost him something, made her look away first. She picked up her tea. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She had a 40-minute bus ride home, and she needed to sleep before Emeka got back. She didn't know that the man in the gray coat was already reaching for his phone. Now, before I tell you who he was, I need to tell you what happened first at the counter. Because the man in the expensive suit behind Folake, the one with the AirPods and the 7:30 meeting, had something to say. Well, that was her problem to solve, not mine, he said to no one in particular, loud enough for everyone. Some of us don't have time to be charitable at 7 in the morning. The woman in the red parka laughed a little, a complicit laugh. The teenage cashier looked at the floor. An older Jamaican man near the pickup counter shook his head slowly. He didn't say anything. He just shook his head, the way you do when you've seen this movie before and you know how it ends. Outside, Folake was already walking to the bus stop. She didn't know any of that had happened. She had her headphones in, a podcast about estate planning, because she was trying to understand what would happen to Emeka if something happened to her. She was 31 years old, and she was listening to podcasts about estate planning on a Tuesday morning because that was the kind of person she was. She also didn't know that the man in the gray coat was standing on the sidewalk 15 feet behind her. His name was Oliver Mensah, and he was the last person in Toronto you'd expect to be riding the 32 bus. Oliver Mensah was 63 years old, born in Accra, Ghana. Came to Canada in 1986 with $200, a reference letter from a secondary school teacher, and a conviction so steady it looked like stubbornness from the outside. He had started in a factory in Brampton, then he'd driven a taxi for 4 years. Then he'd gotten his real estate license while driving the taxi. Then he'd sold his first property. Then his second. Then he'd started a company. Mensah Capital Partners now managed a portfolio of commercial and residential real estate valued at just under $2 billion. Buildings in Toronto, Hamilton, Calgary, and 3 properties in Ottawa. His company had built affordable housing complexes in Brampton and Scarborough. He sat on the board of a foundation that funded scholarships for first-generation Black university students. He had been profiled twice in the Globe and Mail, and once in Report on Business, and both times he had declined to discuss his personal wealth. Money is not a costume, he liked to say, though he'd never told anyone where that phrase came from. He had one rule that he'd kept for 40 years. One morning a month he left the house without his driver, without his wallet, wearing the oldest coat he owned, and he went somewhere ordinary. A bus, a library, a food court, a Tim Hortons on Eglinton Avenue. His daughter had challenged him once. "What's the point, Dad?" "The point is that I remember," he'd said. "I remember what it felt like when no one helped. I remember what it felt like the one time someone did." She'd asked what he was looking for. "I'm not looking for anything," he said. "I'm just watching." He had done this for 37 years. In 37 years, only 3 people had helped him. A Vietnamese grandmother on Spadina who had pressed 2 loonies into his hand at a vending machine. A teenager in Etobicoke who had given up his bus transfer. And now a woman in scrubs with crinkled $5 and a quiet voice saying it's just a coffee like it was the simplest thing in the world. He followed her to the bus stop. Not in a strange way. He just walked the same direction because he needed to think. She got on the 32. He got on behind her. He sat 2 rows back. For 30 minutes, he watched her. She had her headphones in. She was listening to something that made her frown slightly, the concentrated frown of someone working hard to understand something. She had a notebook on her lap with handwritten notes. The handwriting was small and dense. He couldn't read it from where he sat, but he could see the margin notes, asterisks, underlines, the marks of someone taking something seriously. At Lawrence, she got off. He got off, too. She walked toward a low-rise apartment building on a side street. He stopped on the sidewalk and called his assistant. "I need you to find out who works overnight at one of the long-term care homes near Lawrence West," he said. A woman, early 30s, Nigerian, scrubs, blue, the ones from Comfort Keepers. PSW, probably. She just got off the 32 Eglinton bus. His assistant paused. "Oliver, do you want me to just... I want to know her name," he said. "Nothing else, just her name, and whether she has any family here." He stood on the sidewalk for another moment. Then he went home. He did not go back to the office that day. He sat in his study and looked out the window at the February gray and thought about his mother, who had sold tomatoes in Makola Market for 20 years, and who used to say, "Kokafu waho anawahunu no." The one who is really there, you see them. He had seen Foleki Adeyemi. He just didn't know yet what he was going to do about it. Now, while something quiet was beginning for Oliver, something very loud was happening to the man in the expensive suit. His name was Darren Kowalski, regional VP of something financial, though the specifics don't matter as much as what happened next. Someone in that Tim Hortons had filmed him. The clip was 22 seconds. It started with Folake putting her $5 on the counter and saying it's just a coffee, and ended with Darren saying some of us don't have time to be charitable at 7 in the morning. The clip had 40,000 views by noon. Darren's LinkedIn profile was found by 2:15. By 4 o'clock, his employer had received over 300 emails. By the following morning, Darren was on administrative leave, pending a review of conduct inconsistent with company values. His boss, to his credit, did not call it a PR issue. He called it a character issue, which was worse. Darren posted a video. He looked directly into the camera and explained that he was under a lot of stress, that he was going through a difficult personal period, that he was not normally like this. He cried a little, which some people found moving, and most people did not. Nobody mentioned the woman in the scrubs. Nobody knew her name. She had been on the 32 bus, headphones in, podcast about estate planning, completely unaware that 22 seconds of her ordinary life was being shared across the country. Oliver Mensah saw the clip at 7 p.m. that evening. He watched it 4 times. Then he picked up the phone. His assistant had already found her name. 3 days later, on a Friday, Folake got a letter at work. Not an email, A physical letter in an envelope with a Toronto return address she didn't recognize. Her supervisor handed it to her at the start of her shift, a little puzzled. Inside was a card, handwritten, 4 lines. My name is Oliver Mensah. You helped me in a Tim Hortons on Tuesday morning. I would like to thank you properly. Please call this number when you have time. No obligation. Oliver. She turned the card over. Then she Googled the name. She sat down on the floor of the staff break room. You okay? Her coworker asked. I need a minute, she said. She called the number on Sunday, her one morning off that week. She stood in her kitchen while Emeka slept. Nescafe in hand, phone pressed to her ear, trying to decide whether to be suspicious or curious. She had settled on cautious. Oliver picked up on the second ring. Miss Adeyemi, he said. Thank you for calling. I want to be honest with you, she said immediately. I looked you up. I know who you are, and I don't know what to do with this phone call. He laughed. It was a real laugh, the surprised kind. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in about 6 months. I'm a PSW, she said. I work overnight. I'm not looking for charity and I'm not looking for attention. I know, he said. I'm not offering either. I'm offering coffee, the kind you pay for yourself. Silence on the line. There's a cafe on Jane Street, he said. Nothing fancy. Owner is a good man, Sierra Leonean, been there 15 years. Good jollof. I know that place, she said slowly. Tuesday, he said. She thought about it for a long time. Long enough that Oliver waited without filling the silence, which told her something. Tuesday, she said. She was there before him. She had spent more time getting ready than she wanted to admit, which annoyed her, and then she'd changed back into something plain because she decided that whatever this was, she was going to be exactly herself inside it. Brown slacks, a mustard-colored blouse she'd had for 3 years, her hair out for once, unbound. Oliver arrived in the same gray wool coat. You wore it, she said. I always wear it, he said. My daughter says it makes me look like a retired geography teacher. It does, she said. He laughed again. She liked his laugh. It landed. They talked for 3 hours. She told him about Ibadan, about Scarborough, about the 9-year-old girl who had sat on a plane for the first time and pressed her whole face to the window over the Atlantic and decided that wherever she was going to be ready for it. She told him about her mother's hands, how they'd moved through the kitchen, how they'd moved through the market in Ibadan before that, the particular efficiency of a woman who had learned to do everything herself. She told him about Emeka, about the 18 months of immigration paperwork, about the lawyers and the letters and the nights she'd cried into a pillow and gotten up anyway. Oliver listened the way people listen when they're not waiting for their turn to speak. When she was done, he told her about Accra, about the factory in Brampton, about driving a taxi in snow for the first time and not telling anyone he was scared because there was no one to tell. Why the gray coat? She asked. He told her, about the one morning a month, about 37 years of watching. She was quiet for a moment. That's the saddest and most beautiful thing I've ever heard, she said. Why sad? Because you've been doing it for 37 years and only 3 people helped. He looked at her. That's the most accurate thing anyone has ever said to me, he said quietly. She stirred her coffee. I almost didn't, she said. Not because I didn't want to. I always want to. But I had $7, and I'd already budgeted it. But you did. My mama's voice was louder than the math. He nodded. He understood that completely. On the way out, he told her there was something he wanted to offer. Not charity, not attention. He'd said that already and meant it. His company ran a mentorship program. Real estate, property management, business finance. 2 evenings a week for 6 months. It was open to young professionals, but the applications usually came from people who already knew someone. People like Emeka, he said. She looked at him. My brother is studying computer engineering. she said carefully. I know, he said. My assistant mentioned it. I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable. It is a little, she said honestly. I understand, he said. The offer is there. No pressure, no strings. He can apply like anyone else. I just wanted you to know the program exists. She thought about it for the walk home. She thought about it through 2 more overnight shifts. She thought about it sitting across from Emeka on a Sunday evening while he worked through a problem set, and she watched him and tried to imagine what his life could look like if the doors opened a little wider. She told him about the program on a Wednesday. He put down his pencil and looked at her for a long time. Sis, he said. I know, she said. What did you do? I bought a man a coffee. Emeka shook his head slowly. Then he smiled the way he smiled when something was funny and real at the same time. Mama would say you manifested that. Mama would say God put that $5 in my pocket on purpose. Same thing, he said. He applied to the program the following Monday. He was accepted 2 weeks later on the strength of his application alone, before anyone connected his last name to his sister. Oliver's director of programs told Oliver afterward that Emeka Adeyemi was the strongest candidate they'd seen in 3 years. Oliver told Folake when they had coffee the following Tuesday. She pressed her hands together on the table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Thank you, she said. He earned it, Oliver said simply. She looked at him. I meant thank you for wearing that coat on Tuesday. He was quiet. If you'd worn your real coat, she said, I probably would have assumed you were fine. He held that for a moment. Then he said something he hadn't said out loud to anyone. The coat reminds me that I was never the coat, he said. I was always the man inside it. She nodded. 6 months passed. Emeka completed the mentorship program and was offered a part-time position at Mensa Capital Partners, doing data modeling for their property analytics division. He worked 12 hours a week while finishing his degree. The following spring, 2 of his models were used in a real acquisition proposal. He was 20 years old. Folaki's mother, Mama Chidinma, got the medication she needed. The money came from a combination of Folake's remittances and a contribution from a health fund that Oliver's foundation had quietly been running for 6 years, supporting families of care workers across Ontario. Folake had not asked for this. She found out about it 3 months after it happened in a letter from the fund, and she called Oliver immediately. Did you do this? She asked. The fund did, he said. Oliver, Folake. Silence. Thank you, she said. Your mother raised a daughter who gives her last $5 to a stranger, he said. The least the world can do is give her the medication she needs. She didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, lower. You know what my mother said when I told her about the coffee? What? She said. Omomi, owori ni oluwa lo fi fun idi. My child, that hand was given to you by God for a reason. He was quiet on the line. She was right, he said. Folake kept her job at the long-term care home. Not because she had to. She had more options now. She kept it because she loved the residents. Specifically, an Antiguan woman named Miss Gloria, who was 91, and who told the same story about dancing in Antigua in 1967 every Tuesday, and who Folake never once interrupted because the story was beautiful every time. One evening near the end of a shift, Folake was helping Miss Gloria to bed when the old woman held her hand for a moment. You have a good spirit, Miss Gloria said. The kind that attracts good things. I just bought a man a coffee, Folake said. Miss Gloria shook her head. Baby, she said. You made a choice. That's different. Darren Kowalski eventually found another job, something smaller. The experience, he said in an interview he gave much later, had changed him. People debated whether that was true. Folake, when someone told her about the interview, shrugged. I hope it's true, she said. I don't need it to be true for me. but I hope it's true for him. Oliver and Folake had coffee every Tuesday for a year. Then one Tuesday, he asked her if she would consider joining the advisory board of his foundation. He explained the role carefully and professionally, and then he stopped and looked at her. "I'm also asking," he said, "because I would like to keep having coffee with you. Formally now, if that makes sense. Not as the man whose coffee you bought." She looked at him for a long time. "It makes sense," she said. "Yes, to which part?" She smiled. "The real one. The one that came fast. Yes to both." They married 18 months later. Not at a hotel ballroom. At the cafe on Jane Street, closed for a Sunday evening, lights strung from the ceiling, 50 chairs between the tables, the Sierra Leonean owner, who had been there 15 years making jollof that people still talked about the following year. Mama Chidinma came from Ibadan. She arrived at Pearson International Airport in a yellow wrapper, and a headscarf and folaki held her for a long time in the arrivals hall, while Emeka stood beside them, pretending he wasn't crying. Oliver watched from a few feet away. His daughter Aisha stood beside him. "She's something," Aisha said quietly. "She's everything," he said. Emeka gave a toast at the reception. He started with a joke about the fact that his sister had changed the entire trajectory of his life with a $5 bill and a quiet voice. Then he stopped joking. "My sister works the overnight shift," he said. "She skips meals so other people can eat. She fights for the people she loves, even when it costs her. And when a stranger couldn't pay for a coffee, she didn't think about it. She just helped." He paused. "That's not something she does. That's who she is, and if this man is wise enough to see that, then he deserves her." The cafe applauded. Mama Chidinma wept. Miss Gloria, who had been invited because Folaki said it was non-negotiable, clapped the loudest. In the corner, quietly, Aisha leaned toward Oliver. "Dad," she said, "you went out in that coat again last month, I know. Any luck?" He thought about it. "No," he said, "but I'll keep going. Because that's the thing nobody talks about. Kindness isn't always found. Sometimes you have to keep going out in the old coat, month after month, and the world disappoints you. And then one February morning in a Tim Hortons on Eglinton Avenue, a woman in scrubs puts a crinkled $5 bill on the counter and says it's just a coffee, like she has all the money in the world. And she does. Not in her pocket, in her character. That's the only currency that compounds. If this story moved something in you, subscribe to Fresh African Folktales and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, have you ever helped a stranger when you could barely afford to? What happened next?